Today I want to go over 37 useful terminal commands plus 6 bonus ones. The first command I want to go over today is ls. This will list the contents of the directory that you're currently in. Do ls, so this shows me all my files and folders in the current directory. Now one thing we can do to make it a little nicer to read is do -l. This will give us not only in a vertical list, which is sometimes easier to read, but it will also provide us with permissions and ownership and file sizes. Now on the note of the file sizes, you can see that some of them appear to be very large, but those are in a very small measurement. I believe it's in bytes. But so if we throw in another flag, we do ls-h, that will convert it into what they consider human readable. So one is 62 bytes, the other one is 87 kilobytes, 51 bytes, and 3.1 megabytes. So this makes it a little easier to get a gauge of how big a file is because most of us aren't used to reading in bytes. The last flag I want to go over is the A flag. So when you do A, it'll show even the hidden files. So if you notice in the previous one, you don't see this .hidden file. Normally when you do an ls, anything with a dot in front of it won't show up. If you do A, it'll show it. So my usual thing to do is just do LAH because it gives me all the information I need in a very comfortable manner, and I'm just used to looking at it. I use the fish shell, so when I do ls, it automatically does vertical, and then if I do sh, it gives me all that. The next command I want to go over is cd. This is to change the current directory that you're in. So if you notice in here, I have a folder called reference files. So I'm going to cd reference files. Now I am in a different directory. So the cd command lets you move around in your file structure. It's similar that if you were using a GUI or Windows and you clicked on a folder and you went into that folder, same exact concept, no different functionally, just one's in the terminal and one's through a GUI. And if you want to go back, you do cd ... and that will take you back one directory level. You can actually do stacking of the dots. So this will take me back 3 directory levels. And then you can use that to navigate in that way. Another useful flag for this would be to do cd and then tilde. This will just take you to home, your home path, and then from there you can navigate. So if you've navigated deep into a file system somewhere and then you just want to go back to where you were, you can do cd tilde and it'll bring you right back to your home directory. The next command I want to go over is pwd, which stands for print working directory. And all that does is it gives you the path to where you currently are. It's useful for if you're using context for scripting to make sure you're in the appropriate directory. You can use it for relative pathing and stuff like that. But generally, it's also just so you know exactly where you are. And then if you go pwd and you want to go up 2 directories, you can see the 2 directories that you're going to traverse upward. The next useful command is make directory. So mkdir will let you create a new directory. I'll explain the -p in a second. So if I want to make test directory, do mkdir test directory. I do that. And now I have a test directory that I can cd into. Now the -p that shows up automatically for mine would actually let me create multiple levels of directories. So if I want to do test directory and then I want to do 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, that will actually make the entire directory chain all the way down. So I can go cd into test directory and then into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if you see, I went into all of these subdirectories. Now the counter command to make directory is remove directory. So if you want to remove the directory, you would do rmdir and then the directory. Now, if you notice it failed because it only removes empty directories. So if I make a new directory, call it empty, and then I do remove directory on the empty folder, it'll delete it. If you want to delete a folder with contents, you can do rm-rf. So the R stands for recursively, which means that it goes down through everything in that directory and all subdirectories. and F means force. Then you can do that on your test directory. Now, rm-rf can really get you in trouble, so make sure that whatever you use it on, you are positive you want to do that. Otherwise, it is going to delete that, and there's not going to be any recovery unless you use some kind of data recovery tool. And it's gone. Since we're on the note of rm can be used to remove a file or recursively go through and delete files and directories. So if we, let's make a copy of this test.txt file we have and call it remove this.txt. So if we do rm on the remove this.txt, it will delete the file for us. Now this is a deletion. This does not move it into a trash bin or anything of that sort. So make sure that when you use it, you are sure that you want to use that. The next command I want to go over is called touch. So when you do touch and then you go, this is my touched file, it creates an empty file. Now, the reason why it's called touch is because the original purpose of the command was to update access and modification data, but it became kind of a de facto way to create an empty file. So now if I open this file, you can see it's empty. So let's say you want to make the file and then you're going to be doing something with it. You can just touch and it'll create the file and then you can use it for whatever you want. The next command will be cp. Cp lets you copy a file. So if I want to copy this file, I can do cp, the original file I want to copy, and the destination file I want to copy to. So in this case, I'll make it remove.txt. So now if you see, I have the two files, and if I do this, you can see the contents of it. And then if I do this on the copy, you'll see the contents are the exact same. Now, when you copy, you can copy exactly with the same name. You can, but not to the same directory. You can copy to a different name, or you can copy to a different directory. So if I want to copy test.txt to reference files, and I want to call it also remove this, it will copy to a different directory and a different name. So if we go in here, we can see also remove this. I'm going to remove that. So this means you can copy something like, let's say you downloaded something, so you can copy from another directory to another directory and rename it all in one command if you want, just as long as you apply it. And one other useful little thing is, let's say you're already in the reference files and you want to copy the file from the previous directory into this file, this directory. You can do cp ... So you went up a directory and now you're able to see what's in that directory. So I'm going to copy the test.txt. But what I'm going to do is, instead of giving it a name, I'm just going to do dot. The dot basically says here. So it says copy test.txt here. So it won't rename it when you do dot, because you're basically telling it just do it here. And that's CP. So it's, the dot is a useful little one when you're not trying to rename it and you're moving directories. The next command is mv for move. So essentially in this, you, instead of making a copy of it to another directory, it moves the file. So it will no longer exist in the previous directory and it will exist in the new directory. So if we do reference files, if you noticed, it's now no longer in here. And if I cd into it, it's in here. Now I'm going to move this back. So when you're moving directories, you can also not do the dot, depending on if your shell handles it and whatever. But so in this case, I'm doing test moving up a directory. So I'll go back here and it's back. With the copy and move, it's important to remember that it's command, copy or move, your source file with location, and your destination location and file in that order. If you reverse the order, it'll try and do the opposite of that. The next command I want to go over is called cat. And basically what you can do is if you have a file that has information in it, you can do cat and then the file. The reason why it's called cat is because it's for concatenate, because the command was originally intended for cat test. What you can do is you can do multiple files and it'll cat both of them. This is the end of the second file. But cat kind of just became a really useful way to just show what's in the file without even concatenating it. So it's called cat and you can use it to concatenate, but it often gets used also to just simply display file data. The next command is more useful in scripting typically, but what it does is it lets you see what's in a variable. So for instance, a default environment variable of your system would be home. So what $sign does is it says, give me the value of the home variable, and then echo is going to print it to the screen. So if you do echo home, it's going to print your working directory. Echo can also be used to print out a string. So when you're writing a script, if you want to print a statement in Bash, you do echo instead of print, like if you're familiar with something like Python. But it can also be used to show variables, and you can even combine them to, I believe, I hope this is right. Yep, there you go. You can put multiple things together if you need that. Again, it's more used in scripting, but it's a useful command to know, even for basic scripting. Now, when you're working with a larger file, so in this case, my test2.txt has about 5,000 lines. But if you cat that, it's going to put out all 5,000 lines. So we'll see what happens when we do that. And then you got to scroll back. So if you wanted to see it with this top is very long. So what you can do is you can do head of the file. And what it'll do is it'll show the first 10 lines of the file. The counter to that would be tail, which you can do, and it will show you. This is good if you just want to peek at the file and kind of get a sense of what data is there without opening the entire file. It's also useful for when you have a file that is so large, if you actually tried to open it up in an editor, it would either take a very long time or crash it. You can still see what's at the top of it. Now, when you do head on the file, you can also specify the number of lines you want to output. So in this case, we'll do 10 on this. And you'll see it's 10, and then we'll make that 20. If you want to peek more into the file starting at the beginning, you can just specify the number of lines you'd want to output to the screen. Tail also supports that as well, just starting from the end of the file back up. So if you're looking at logs that are very large, you can check the end of the log fairly easy without opening the entire log. One other command is less that you can use in a similar fashion when you're using a very large file. What it does is it only opens up a portion of the file at a time, and you can scroll through. So again, when you have a very large file that would be difficult to open up in an editor, you can actually just scroll through sections of the file without needing to open the entire file. And to leave, you can just press Q. It's Vim bindings. One other command that I use all the time, you've already probably seen me use it 50 times, is clear. And all it does is clears your terminal session. So if you do ls and ls and ls and it's full, and you just want to visually clean it up, you just do clear. Now the next ones are more utilities, and I'm not going to go too deep into them, but essentially you have vi, which is on virtually every Linux system. There are some exceptions. Vi is Vim, but the pre-Vim. It was what Vim was built on. It's a text editor. And then you have actual Vim. And if you notice, Vim looks a little fancier. It has some color highlighting. It has relative line numbers, etc. So Vi is on almost everything. And the reason why I bring it up is because sometimes if you're working on a server and you don't have a GUI, Vi is almost always there. So if you need to get in, you need to edit a file, you need to fix something, you can use vi. I strongly recommend learning vim key bindings, even the basic ones, just for this. Vim is often around, but not always. Vi is almost always there. And of course, I use neovim because why not? And this is even more advanced and customizable. They all functionally do the same thing, but they have different add-ons and plugins and capabilities that can be expanded. You don't need to become a master at Vim or VI. It's just very, very useful to know. In the same way that as much as I really dislike Nano, I know a little bit of Nano because on certain systems, Nano is the default editor. And if I need to edit a file, I can use Nano. If I can, I'll install VI because I much prefer to use VI. But if I have to, I'll use Nano. Now, I've gone over several of the commands and several of their flags, but one thing that's very, very useful to know is if you know the command but you don't remember a flag, or you want to learn more about how it works and what other options you have, you can use what's called man. So M-A-N. So what this lets you do is open up the manual page for the piece of software that you want to use, or the tool you want to use, or the command you want to use. So in this case, you would do man, and then let's say ls. So this actually brings up the ls, it's the list directory contents. It shows you how to put it in, ls option file, the description. It shows your various options that you can use. So -a is the same as --all. So that's an important thing when you're reading it, is sometimes you'll have flags, two different flags that do the same thing. So -a or --all. -all is a little more apparent what it's doing, but -a is shorter. So that's why there's typically multiple versions. In the same way, capital A and -- almost -all is the same thing because one is a shorthand, but one is easier to remember what it is. You can scroll up and down using, again, Vim bindings. So J and K will bring you up and down, and Q will get you out. Very, very useful if you forget how something works and you don't want to go look it up. I mean, you can go Google it, or you can use an LLM or whatever you want, but sometimes when it's really quick and you just remember what that flag is, the man page is very useful. Or if you're not on the internet, it still works. So the next command is called which. I just used the ls command, but that is a command of a binary that exists somewhere. So I can go which ls, and it'll actually show me the location of ls. If you're running something, and let's say you're running Python or some other application or something, and you don't know where it's installed, you can do which, and it'll tell you where it is. Sometimes you'll have multiple versions of things installed in different directories, so this will allow you to ensure that you're using the exact one that you want to use. In a similar vein, you can do whereis, and it gives you a little more information, and it even shows you where the man page is. The next command I want to go over is called the find command. You can use it to search. So remember I said dot means here. So if I want to search find here, put in the name of a file. And if you see, it searched down a directory because that's where the file was. So it shows me that in the reference files, the most common .txt is there. You can also use this with like a wildcard. So you can find all text files here. You can replace the dot with a directory that you want to search. So if I want to find all text files in my reference files, I can do it that way, and it'll show me all the text files in there. You can also use it to do file types, file sizes, like bigger than a certain size. Lots of really useful things, but the basic syntax to understand is find, location, and then you can do a name. Name is a common one, or a type or an extension, and you can find things that way. So I could also flip the wildcard if you guys aren't familiar with it. So I could do test. Everything that starts with test. So I have test2, test.txt. So you can use the wildcards in that way. That has to deal with like regex type typing and all that stuff, and find, you can do a lot with it. So if you really want to dig into it, you can read the man page or do some more research, but this is just the basic to get you going. So if you're looking for a file in a directory and you know the exact file name, you can just search for the file name. It'll tell you where it is. If you kind of remember what it starts with or the type of file it is, you can also use the wildcards to fill in the gaps to find what you're looking for. And the next command I want to talk about is called grep, where find will search for file names and directories. Grep will actually go into the files to look for things. So for an example, if I want to grep for the number 1 in the small test txt, it shows me that there are 2 lines, which it prints out, that have the number 1 in it. And if I want to grep for the number 10, there's only 1. If I do the number 3, there's also only 1. I'll show you the file in a moment. Or if I do a word, it'll show me all 10 of them because it's in all 10. So if we look at the file, grep will come in and it will do partial matches, it'll do full matches, anything like that. So grep is really useful for when you're looking for a file where maybe you talked about something but you don't remember where it is or what the file name is or anything like that. This can actually let you search through files, and you can actually hand it directories, and you can go recursively through to check and look. So one other thing you can do is if we do grep, let's say we're looking for the letter I in the file. If you notice, it highlights all of the I's, even in the same lines. So it's very useful when you're trying to search through contents of files to try and get things. You can do a little more advanced usage with things, depending on your use case, but just know that find lets you search for files and directories by name. Grep lets you actually look inside of those files. Now, another really useful command, we're starting to get into a little more sysadmin type stuff of actually looking into your system, is df. So if you do df, it shows your disk usage. So you have your file systems listed and your used and available and percentages and where it's mounted. Now we can again throw in the -h flag to make it human readable. So now you can see the disk I have is 897 gigabytes. I've used 639 gigabytes and I have 255 gigabytes, which I'm surprised I'm using that much. So I have to go investigate why. And then it shows all the other drives and mount points you have and everything and their usages and their sizes. In a similar vein, there is the free command, which shows your memory usage. So the first one is your disk usage. This is your memory usage. And again, you can do -h to make it much easier to read. Formatting is a little weird, I think, because of the size. But I have a total of 31 gigs. I've used 6.3, so I have 16 free gigs of RAM. The swap partition is also shown. I have 34 gig swap, but I'm not using any of it right now. Now, these two commands are two commands of the same side of the coin, and quite frankly, are not necessarily at all, but are totally necessary. So one is neofetch, and as I'm sure you have seen this if you've seen anyone use Arch, because everyone uses it to show off. So this gives you a bunch of information about your computer as well as a cool icon, ASCII art, and it shows, it's even showing that I'm using Kitty and that I have what my graphics card is, my resolution and everything. However, neofetch is, I believe, deprecated. I believe it's not supported anymore unless something has changed. So there's now fastfetch, which is the common one. And this it's the same idea. I believe it's even made by the same person, but it's a little more updated. I believe it's written in a different language, and the image that it shows is random images. And here, I'll do another one. So yeah, I think it's Poochie from Chainsaw Man. So fastfetch is just the newer, more modern version. Both still work as far as I know, so choose what you like, but fastfetch is technically the updated version. When you're working and you have a process that's running and you need to see what's going, you can do PS. So this shows my current processes within the session, which is fish and PS. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliberately create a process that opens up and doesn't close. So now you see I have bash running in the back. So PS will show you processes, and there's different processes currently within the shell. So bash, fish, and PS are the only ones that are right there. If I want to get rid of that process, I can kill it, but I'll come back to that command in a second. Another way you can look at your processes are top, which is a much more detailed view, and it shows a lot more system information and all of your processes, like your system processes as well. Then there is also htop, which is similar idea, just colored and has different layouts for certain things. For the most part, use what you like. You can look into them, see their nuanced differences, but they do essentially the same thing. I'm including both because you might see different ones said being told to use in different spots. So it's good to just be aware of them. But top and htop are largely the same thing. The difference is htop is interactive and you can do stuff with it, whereas top is more of just a display. Now, on that note, I still have that process hanging around in the back. So what I can do is I can do kill-15 and then type in PID. Now, when you do 15, what it does is you're telling it to gracefully shut down. Now, did it stop? It did not. So when you have a stubborn process that does not want to shut down, so this would be if you had a process in the background and it was working, you just want to shut it down, you can do -15. If it's refusing to shut down, you can do -9, and that forces it to die. That just kills it fast. No letting it safely save anything or anything like that. Be aware, make sure you type in the right ID number, otherwise you could very well end up killing something important. One other command, if you spent any time in the shell and you've likely come across, is sudo. Sudo lets you run with super user privileges or root privileges, depending on how you want to call it. Essentially, when you want to alter, let's say, a system file or something like that, your user doesn't have permission. So you need a sudo into privileged access to make those changes. If I have, this is a bad example, but this test file, if I want to do nvim on the test file, if it was something that required sudo privileges to edit, even if I could see it, I couldn't change anything. But if I do sudo and then the command and what I want to do, so you just put sudo in front of whatever it is you want to do, you then do it as the root user, as the super user. And then it actually prompts you for your password, which of course I mistype. And then you now accessed it as, oh, it's updating. Okay. You now access it as the super user. Typically when you do updates, you need to do it as sudo. You would sudo your command, or sometimes the helpers automatically will prompt you for password, but what they're doing essentially is moving into sudo or root. If you ever reach something where you're trying to do something and it's telling you don't have privileges, you would sudo to do it. Next command is if you're working in shells and you want to leave that shell, you can use the exit command. So for instance, if I open up the bash shell, I now technically have a shell inside of a shell here. If I do exit, it gets me back out of that. You can use it to exit the one we're currently in, but I'm not going to do that because it's going to mess up my stream. But you can use exit to get out of any shell that you're in. Now, another useful command, I use this all the time actually, is called history. When you do that, it opens up your history and you can actually scroll through. Now, what it happens is as you're working in the terminal, it's actually keeping a history, a log of everything that you're typing in. Very useful, because if you did a command and you forgot what the command was, like let's say yesterday you were working on something and you did a command, you can actually go in and see what you did. So you can see, you could either try and undo it, or if you need to repeat the command, and again uses vim key bindings, you can go up and down and you can use this to see your history. Q gets you out. These two aren't exactly full commands, but they're useful. So you have the exclamation point. What this lets you do is, let's say I did nvim on this file and I wanted to open it. And then let's say I couldn't because I didn't have privileges. So if you do sudo, oh, actually I need to leave fish shell for this. If I do sudo exclamation point, it will actually, what it's doing is the two exclamation points repeat the last command, but then I'm putting sudo in front of it. So I'm saying do the last command, but with sudo. And then it will do that. It's just a very useful thing. So if you have this long command you typed out and you forgot to put sudo in front of it, you don't have to retype it. You can just do sudo. I think they're called bang bang. So you can do sudo bang bang, it's the 2 exclamation points, and it will replay the pass command with sudo in front of it, and then you can log in and do it that way. The other one is the AND operator. So this essentially lets you do chaining of commands. So if I want to do echo 1 and echo 2, it will execute echo 1, and then it'll execute echo 2. So if you see they're on 2 different lines because they're 2 separate commands. So if you have an instance where you want to put multiple commands on the same line, you can use the AND operator, and you can do as many as you want, and you can keep chaining them. More useful for scripting, but is definitely useful for certain commands. One example would be in Ubuntu when you're using apt, you would do, at least you used to do when you would do apt get, you would do apt get update and apt get upgrade. And what that would do is it would update your packages and then it would upgrade your packages. And you just did them together because you pretty much always needed to do them together, because whenever you wanted to upgrade, you had to do update first. So this was just a very common one-liner to type in to take care of it. Speaking of apt, I'm going to go over package managers somewhat briefly. So if you're on a Debian-based system, like Ubuntu or Debian or anything Mint, you would use apt. I was using apt-get before. That's the older way. They just do apt now. So you can do apt update. You can do apt upgrade. Update will pull new packages but it won't install anything. Upgrade will install new packages and update your currently installed ones. If you do apt install and then the package name, so like let's say we do neovim, you can do apt install neovim, and then you hit enter and then you can install the package. If you for some crazy reason no longer want it, you can remove it by doing apt remove neovim. If you are looking for a package but you only remember a partial name or anything like that, you can do apt search neovim. Those are some of your most basic, most common commands that you use on apt. You can do most things you would want to do with apt with those commands. Similar vein for Fedora or other systems based on Fedora or RHEL, they use DNF. So they have your DNF check update. They have DNF upgrade. So again, update will check for updates, upgrade updates packages, install package name. Similar idea, just DNF instead of apt. And then you can remove, same idea. And then for move, and then you can search for it. If you're on Arch, like I am, by the way, you can use pacman. Pacman's a little more obtuse with its how it works. Like you do SYU, this will synchronize your packages and upgrade all installed packages. Then if you want to install a package, you can do -s and then the package name. If you want to remove it, you can do R package name. Now this is an important one to know. If you want to remove it and the dependencies that came along with it, you can use RS and then the package name. If you want to search, you would do SS and then you can search for the package name. Now we're going to get into a couple of bonus commands. These are not necessarily required a lot of the time, but can be very useful for certain situations. First is ifconfig. This will pull up your network devices. So for instance, this is the local IP address to my system. Hopefully I'm not actually leaking anything important, but it will show the various interfaces that you have. So if you have a wireless and a wired network card, you will see both of them. If you set up VPNs, they'll also show up in there for the ones that create their own virtual network adapter. And so that's how you'll see those. Another very useful command would be ping. So you can do something like ping google.com. And so you'll see here, this 16.7.5.5.5 is the time it takes for a packet to go from your system to Google and back. Now, interestingly, you can, for whatever reason, Bing has always had a faster ping than Google. Go figure. Yahoo's over here doing a lot slower. So, it all depends. Where you live, the location, where the servers are to you and everything will definitely make an impact. But ping is really useful for if you're like, I'm not sure if I have internet, like if something's just broken or if I don't have internet. Ping is a really nice way to test and see if you have internet. You can see if you have your latency issues, stuff like that. Another very useful command is curl. It was originally called HTTP GET, but it was called client for URLs. Some complicated history in there, but basically when you do curl on a web page, it will actually just pull the HTML. Now, Google has JavaScript, and so stuff doesn't look right. But curl can be useful for certain websites actually just have where they are just raw HTML, and so you can actually load a lot of the data from them. Curl can be leveraged in things. You can also save the output to a file. You can pass information with it. So you can get advanced with curl. Curl is another one I like for testing connectivity. So like, let's say it pings, but for some reason something's broken along the way and you're not able to get any data out of it. It's also really nice if you're hosting some kind of a server and you can ping the machine, but you're not sure if you're getting through to the right port or anything like that. You can use curl to kind of hit it and see if you're getting a response. Another command that, depending on what you're doing, you may use all the time or you may never use is called wget. It stands for wget. One thing that's very useful about wget is you can actually use it to download a file. So certain places might have like a file share set up, and so if you put in the URL pathing to that file and use wget, it'll actually download the file. It's the equivalent of navigating to it in a browser and clicking on it to download, but you can use it directly. Gets very useful if you're doing scripting or if you know exactly what you're doing, or if you're doing you have your own kind of file share set up. It allows you to just download the file. Very useful for certain situations. The next one would be SSH. So this is if you want to get into another system or a server through SSH. So it's secure shell is what SSH stands for. So you would go SSH, you would do user at IP address. So 192.168.101. So what this would allow you to do is actually SSH to the machine. And if it's not being blocked, it'll give you a login prompt, and then you'd actually be able to log into the system. So if I have a server running on my network somewhere else, I can SSH into it and actually access a TTY on that system from my system. Again, only useful in that situation, but very useful for managing servers, or if you have any kind of a home server and you want to get into it and access it. Lastly, but certainly not least, I've used this a lot in my professional setting, is SCP, which is to securely copy files. But what this lets you do is it lets you copy files between machines. So that machine that you SSH'd into, maybe you want to upload a file or you want to download a file, you can use SCP to copy it. So if you want to copy the file to a remote host, you would do SCP, then you would do the file that you want to transfer. Then, similar to logging in SSH, you would do your user at the address. I'm going to type all of it out, and then you can actually specify like home/user or whatever. So you can tell it to go to that server in this directory, and that's where you want to transfer the file to. If it requires a login, you would have to authenticate. That's what SCP is used for. I didn't go into incredible detail on some of these because they're a little more advanced usage. It's really good to at least be aware of them, what their function is and what they want to do. So if you need to do something like that in the future, you know what to Google, you know what to look for. And with that, that's 43 very useful terminal commands. I have used, if not all of these, almost all of these over the years through my personal and my professional career. And I hope you enjoyed it. This video was requested by a bunch of people, so I decided to make this first. Please let me know what you guys think, if you want me to make any more deep dives on anything in particular, because each of these, or a lot of these, you could go very deep into depending on your use cases. And like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.